So, it's about 10 a.m. at the time of writing this. I couldn't sleep at all last night. I live in a small town of a few hundred people in the middle of nowhere in northern India. It's surrounded by a huge forest on the western side and farmlands on the other three. My house is positioned on the southeastern corner of the village. So, last night at around 2 a.m., I was awakened by this blood-curdling scream coming out of the east. I think it was loud enough to wake our entire village, though I haven't talked to anyone about it yet. This scream sounded like nothing I'd ever heard, like a mix between a scream and a howl. Mind you, there are no animals in our area except for some stray dogs and a few wild boars. This scream was loud enough to give me goosebumps. I quickly turned off all of my lights and looked out of the window which faces the south. And that's when I saw it. About 100 meters away from me. It looked like a canine-like creature running on two legs. Its fur looked silvery white under the moonlight. It was running at very high speeds and crossed from where I saw it into the forest in about 30 seconds. But in the middle of its journey, when it was closest to my home, it stopped for a few seconds and looked in my direction. I'm still not sure if it was looking at me or something else. One thing that I've been thinking about is how slowly its legs moved, yet how fast it ran. This could only mean that this creature was very big, at least 10 feet tall. I'm terrified right now, as my village has this saying that we should never look outside of our windows at night, as evil spirits might see us and come into our lives. Edit. I asked around my neighborhood, and many people were woken by that scream. An older guy told me that the creature is a Rakshasa, which is some kind of demon. I've only been here 6 months, and several people told me hearing screams is a regular occurrence here, and the Rakshasa will haunt whoever it lays its eyes on. I'm scared as fuck right now. I'm going to install CCTV cameras around my entire house. Me and two of my friends were driving to a skate park down a long main road with tons of cars and huge views of vast fields and farmlands that you can see pretty far on either side of the road. I'm sitting in the back. My friend, riding shotgun, didn't see anything, but he's blind as a bat and is generally unobservant anyway, so he missed what we saw, so I won't be mentioning him further, but he was there. The driver was my friend visiting from serving in the Navy. It was his first time home since high school pretty much. This dude isn't into the paranormal or anything conspiracy related. He's what you would call a stick in the mud when it comes to conspiracies. A sort of government brainwashed army soldier type who doesn't have time for nonsense. He takes no shit and will physically be angered by me or my friends joking around about aliens, 9/11, or any type of conspiracy. He'll tell you that nothing exists except for us and the earth, yada yada. Well, he did, until this day. So we're driving down this road, and I'm staring out into the field, and I see a man in the middle of it. He completely catches my eye, since the fields are so empty and plowed this time of year. He's just chilling in the field, staring out into the sky, maybe 150 yards off the road, so far enough that you can't make out distinct features, but close enough that you know there's a 6-foot-tall dude in a red flannel jacket. Pure old school hunter, Clark Griswold looking burly man. I never took my eyes off of him, and I looked at him for maybe a long second or two, as we drove past, but in the seconds as we came parallel to him and then past him, there was no longer a man. There was a deer. A straight up deer, normal as shit. There was no transformation. It didn't drop half size and become a deer. It just was a man, and then it wasn't. In the blink of an eye. I can't explain it any further. It just changed instantly like a film effect. I sat there for a second, pondering what I just saw. I almost didn't want to say anything, as the token stoner of the group. I figured they'd laugh at me, and my Navy friend would get mad, and tell me I was stupid. But I noticed the car was in a weird silence at that moment, so I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna break the awkward silence. I said, dude, I swear, I just saw the weirdest thing a second ago. And my Navy friend, dead straight face, said, was it a guy standing out in the field in all red that randomly turned into a deer? I literally dropped my jaw to the floor and said, you saw that shit too? And he said, yeah, I wasn't even going to say anything because it seemed so ridiculous, but when you mentioned something weird, I knew you must have saw it too. We talked plenty about how it was a tall ass guy in a red flannel jacket, and how it wasn't a transformation. It was almost like a pure switch in thin air. We don't get to talk much since he's serving in Greece, but he tells his bunk buddies the story all the time, and not many believe him. I'm still a misfit and carry the story to tons of skate parks and parties and hangouts, and no one ever believes me until I say, well, this guy was there and he saw it too, and they instantly stop laughing and say, oh shit, he saw it too? Because we all know that he has no fun or imagination when it comes to these things, and everyone knows he's the more realistic and grounded one of us. So the fact that we saw the same thing at the same time still blows my mind, and it was one of the craziest experiences of my life. When I ask if he believes there's more to the world, he still says no. Even after that experience, he says there's an explanation, but the red flannel jacket just makes the whole thing so irreversible. We clearly saw a strange phenomenon. This took place in Maryland, about 30 minutes from Baltimore, so not much area folklore, and definitely no skinwalker stories. There were Native American settlements, but no more than your average place. I don't know if this is the right sub for this, but I couldn't find a sub for identifying this animal, other than for bugs. I don't believe this was something paranormal or metaphysical. I think it's likely just an animal we've personally never seen before, due to not spending a ton of time in the woods. And I'd be interested to find out if some more experienced campers or hikers have seen something similar. I've posted this on a bunch of threads, but I'm always late to the party, and my post gets buried. Anyway, we were spending a night alone at my family's place, before the rest of the family got there. It's a cabin on an island, and while it's close to town, it's still pretty private. There are deer, mink, foxes, all kinds of small animals, but we've never seen a bear out there, so I'm assuming this wasn't one. We had just finished bringing a bunch of stuff in from the car, and suddenly, out of nowhere, an animal comes barreling out of the woods, across the road, in front of the cabin, and off the edge of a cliff next to the lake, all in about 5 to 7 seconds. I kinda figured I'd imagined it, until my fiance said, "Dude, what kind of animal was that?" I went to investigate because clearly, I'd be the first to die in a horror movie, and it's just completely gone. The only place it could have went was into the water. We didn't hear a splash or anything. We kept an eye out for the rest of the week, but never saw it again. The animal in question was about the size of a medium to large sized dog, somewhere between the size of a golden retriever and a German shepherd, with a long tail about the length of its body. It had a long nose, but an otherwise unremarkable face. But there was something weird about its legs. Almost like they were backward, or one pair of legs was shorter than the other. It ran really clumsily. If you've ever seen a video of a gorilla running on all fours, it was kind of like that. It went off the side of the cliff, presumably into the water, and we never saw it again. I saw something that looked similar, but not quite the same. The second sighting, it looked more like a supersized mink, and walked like those Boston Dynamics robots. About a year later, walking along the shoreline while I was in a boat. I'm not convinced it was the same animal though. The second one was probably something related to a wolverine. Does anybody have any idea what this thing was? I grew up in Northern California, Santa Rosa to be specific. We lived in a very small row of pretty cheap houses in the middle of a growing industrial area. Not being terribly close to many shops, and not having an overabundance of kids my own age to play with, I rode my bike quite a bit. I used to spend a fair amount of time riding my bike down to the Sonoma County Airport, with its sweet, fully stocked vending machines, and then back to my own street. It was on one of these treks, as a 9-year-old, that I saw something that I still can't explain. It looked, for lack of any better description, like a golden oval at a slight angle. Whatever it was, it definitely wasn't touching the ground. I could see space underneath it. It didn't particularly make any noise, but rather the opposite. I noticed that the closer it got, the less I could hear anything around me. Again, we were in the middle of a busy industrial district with a cement factory and a gun stock manufacturing plant within 2 blocks. However, the closer that the object came, the more oppressive the silence became. It seemed to be spinning and moving about the same speed as a car as it came toward me. It paused at a stop sign and then turned to the left down an intersecting road. Again, it just looked like a golden oval that seemed to be muting everything in its vicinity. My lizard brain told me to get away from it, and I pedaled with all my might back toward my house. It continued down the road until it was out of sight. At the time, my best guess was that it was some kind of angel. I had read that they looked like wheels, and it seemed like the best fit. Since then, I've read a lot about other people's encounters with the unknown, but I've never seen anything quite matching what I saw. This happened in the summer of 2019, when I was working as a counselor in a teen summer camp. I was in charge of one of the tents, the age range being 12 or 13, and all girls, so I made sure that I knew everyone's names and faces. One of the kids was this girl who had been to the camp a few times. We all got the feeling that her parents just dumped her there every summer to get her out of their way, which is pretty common, sadly. She was the kind of kid that didn't talk with anyone and would often fade into the background a lot of the time. I tried my hardest with her every time she came to camp, but she was very shy and refused to talk with me and the other kids, so we pretty much left her to it. One night, after dinner, we were getting everyone ready to sit around the campfire, and I quickly ran into my cabin to grab a few things, and I saw her sitting on her bunk. So I called over, "Hey, come and get ready for the campfire." But she just sat there looking at me and didn't get up. We have a policy that every camper has to participate during campfire, So I told her something along the lines of, "Well, you do know you have to come and sit with us soon, right?" And after saying this, I walked out of the cabin and sat down with the other kids around the campfire. As I'm looking around the circle, I realize that she's sitting right there in front of me. Straight away, I do a double take and say something like, "Wow, that was quick. I just saw you inside." But according to her and the others, she had been there the whole time. Now, it was definitely her inside of the cabin. I even went back inside to see if there was another girl in there and I was just mistaken. But the cabin was completely empty. The only thing off that I noticed was that the girls' bed covers were messy, as if someone had just been on the bed. I don't think it was a prank, since none of the other girls were laughing, and like I described, this girl was shy and didn't really interact with the other kids. She wasn't the type to pull a prank. There was also no possible way that she could have run ahead of me within seconds of me talking to her, and then being able to sit down near the campfire. I kind of looked at her funny for the rest of that summer. This happened about 7 years ago, when I was 16. This story requires a bit of backstory, so bear with me for a sec. My dad's side of the family lives in deep southeast Texas. I'm talking like 100 people to a town deep. That being said, my cousin lives down there. My cousin grew up learning every single inch of the woods, every sound, every smell. You get the point. He could hear an animal moving way off in the distance and tell you what it is without any hesitation. I want to preface this by saying I don't know what exactly this thing was, but the closest I could come up with must have been either a Wendigo or a Skinwalker. Alright, so the night of the encounter, me, my cousin, and my best friend all head into the woods. You know, dumb 16-year-old shit. We all had shotguns, as we like to raccoon hunt, or just shoot at random shit for fun. If you've ever been in a pine forest, you know that there's pretty much no lighting from the moon when it gets dark, so we brought headlamps to be able to see where we were going. Eventually, we come up on a high bank on a creek, probably about a 15-foot drop or so, I'd say. You could almost say we were on a peninsula. The water flowed around the spot we were at in a U-shape. We decided to sit down, turn off our headlamps, and look up at the trees to see if we could see any stars. After sitting silently in the dark for about 15 minutes, my friend goes to turn on his headlamp. My cousin grabs his arm and whispers to the both of us, "There's something about 20 yards to our right, and it's moving toward us." I've never been more terrified in my life as when I listened and heard heavy bipedal footsteps making its way to us steadily. This thing wasn't searching, it was beelining. At this point, we all just freeze in place and listen. It reaches the bank on the other side of the peninsula, and without skipping a beat, starts descending. We hear it enter the water, and eventually come to the other side of the creek, the side that we were on. It starts scaling the drop-off, effortlessly. This thing kept the same pace, whether it was level, descending, in the water, or climbing. It's now only about 30 feet or so away at this point. My cousin whispers, "On the count of 3, turn on our headlamps and shoot." The footsteps kept getting closer. They were heavy, heavier than any animal that would be in those woods. On the count of 3, we turn on our headlamps, and nothing. No sound of something scurrying away. No footsteps. Nothing. We hightailed it out, with one person guarding the rear. What do you guys think? I'm convinced I almost had a deadly encounter. Am I crazy?